I am Nicole Fisher. So I'm excited to be in this room full of entrepreneurs who are here, obviously, because you want in-depth tactical insight on how funding works for early stage life science companies, and specifically because the goal of this panel is to give you real world examples of experiences from investors and from leaders. What I'm going to do, because there are so many of us, is I'm going to have each person, and we'll just keep it linear for the moment, very quickly go down the line and give everyone a little bit of background, who you are, where you are, and what exactly it is that you do. So I'll start with you.
Okay. Alex Wiener, I'm with GE Ventures. I'm investing in healthcare for General Electric. We invest in pretty much all aspects of healthcare with the exception of drugs and implants. And a geographical standpoint, I just moved recently from Menlo Park to Boston 2 weeks ago.
My name is Allison Plosco, and I lead Village Capital's healthcare practice. So we are an investment fund with an affiliated accelerator. So we invest in companies that go through our program. We are global. We have 4 offices around the world, and we work in health in addition to edtech, fintech, energy, and agtech.
I'm Annie Hazelhurst, and I oversee a new venture fund called Paradigm. We're investing pretty broadly from a sector perspective, but I have a particular interest in intersections of kind of what I started to refer to as science and software. A lot of that falls into the health area, but it also has already included other areas like satellites and just artificial intelligence systems on a general basis. And we mostly do early stage, but we're pretty flexible from a stage perspective.
Hi, I'm Dylan Morris. I work at Innovation Endeavors. We're an early stage venture firm doing mostly seed and Series A. We're solely backed by Eric Schmidt, the chairman of Alphabet, used to be Google. We have offices in Tel Aviv and Palo Alto, and have traditionally been a software-focused technology fund, but over the last 3 or so years, we've moved into some specific verticals with more force, including cybersecurity, agriculture, and life sciences. And my interest really is at the intersection of data science and life science.
Hi, I'm Linda Pan, and I'm representing Watson Health. I'm from IBM. I focus on the strategic partnerships and solutions group within the life science industry within IBM Watson Health. And I'd just like to let all of you know that our new headquarters for Watson Health is actually down the street, not so far from here. It's at Cambridge on 75 Main Street. But IBM Watson Health is pretty much global, so we have presence around the world. And we have solutions and offerings within the life science as well as other healthcare sectors available all over the world. So, which hopefully I'll talk about more about later on.
Thank you. And I'm really impressed. You really kept that short and sweet. Thank you. That never happens. And I'm Nicole Fisher. For those of you who weren't around at lunch, I'm a health policy advisor on the Hill. I also write health tech innovation for Forbes. And so I get to work in a really cool space where I get to constantly talk to investors, I get to talk to startup companies, I get to think about what comes next. And then I also get to go to the Hill and brainstorm about what the hell are we going to do with these things that are possible and in front of us, good, bad, and sometimes I say the best thing we can do is just let them be, let them grow. So I have so many questions for you guys, and I'll leave some time at the end for questions, so don't worry, we'll get there, and if you don't have any, I have so many more. And so actually I'm going to jump in with looking at the funding landscape. So Annie, I like what you said about science and software, so I'm actually going to start with you. So, in particular, I guess, is there capital out there to support early stage life science companies? So, where is it? What does that landscape look like in your domain?
Yep. So, I mean, I think it depends on what you. Well, the answer varies depending on what within life science you're referring to. I think everyone here is pretty familiar with the notion that drugs and therapeutics and devices have a whole genre of investor that's really established to fund those areas. Some of the stuff that I'm particularly interested in, where you're sort of dealing with what are really software systems that are touching health, anywhere from just data management through, that affects R&D through to clinical applications, is an area that I think who the investors are that are willing to fund those companies, especially at an early stage when they're still really deep in technology and product development, is kind of a continuously emerging theme, because you have some life science focused funds that are willing to do it, some, you know, of the more traditional tech generalist funds that are willing to do it, but it's a little bit unclear who has real defined strategies in it. And that I think does create confusion, both for investors who want to invest in it and also for entrepreneurs with respect to, you know, who they can assume they can be going to for sources of capital throughout the fundraising cycle. So I think Dylan would have a lot of perspective on this as well.
That's exactly where I was going to go next.
No, it's definitely true, and there's a big gap between the more traditional life science funding groups who are looking at therapeutics and devices, who understand the regulatory and reimbursement challenges associated with those, compared to the more traditional tech investors who, you know, are used to the shorter life cycles, the faster returns, the lack of oversight from a regulatory perspective. And they want to take the sort of lean startup approach, minimum viable product, get out there, see what customers have to say, and that's not something you can do if your device is subject to regulation. So I would say, you know, at least from our perspective, there's definitely funding available for those companies that meet that criteria of operating in a non-regulated space, applying software principles. You know, companies that look like and feel like to us traditional technology companies, but whose applications are in the life sciences sector, whether that's pharma for drug development or whether that's for, you know, clinical use cases that are more like decision support software, starting to blend to the, you know, automated diagnostics, but we're not, you know, that still carries with it quite a lot of risk. And so, you know, the companies we're looking at are those that, as Annie mentioned, are applying machine learning, you know, AI in some capacity to the large data sets to try to, you know, improve outcomes and at the same time lower costs. But it is a real challenge.
So I want to jump to you, Allison. So you're helping entrepreneurs solve major global challenges. So with that same kind of lens, how has the landscape changed over the last few years?
So what's been interesting is we work primarily in health IT. One thing I didn't mention is that we do have an impact focus, and so we are really looking to work with companies who are moving the needle disproportionately for low-income patients. And so in the US, we define that as Medicaid, Medicare recipients, and internationally, those living on $2 or less a day. And so we've worked with a diagnostic company that is a cervical cancer screening diagnostic, and they were looking to raise their Series A, and where they actually, so they're, I should say they're dually headquartered in Austin and in Monterey, and where they actually raised their Series A was in Mexico, and it was all with Mexican capital, and the Mexican VC landscape is rapidly developing. Most of it is still somewhat sector agnostic, but I would say that was the biggest, one of the biggest changes that I've seen is that the entrepreneurs actually went to Mexico to raise capital for the diagnostic.
Awesome. That's nice to hear a little like social good. That's probably fit. I like that. So let's talk about helping early stage companies navigate the investment process. So the saying is, you know, the best way to catch a fish is to think like one. So how can an early stage scientist begin to think like you? You know, what should they understand about organizations, or what's the best way to say get your foot in the door, start the conversation? We have things like the partnering here that significantly help. But you know, you've got to start a dialogue. That's sometimes branding, messaging. So Linda, I know you're very good with partnerships, so I kind of like to start with you about what is it that you're looking for, or how can they think more like you?
Yeah, thanks. It's a very good question, Nicole. So within the IBM Watson team company, actually, we have, I want to actually highlight for you guys 2 programs that probably would be very pertinent to early startup company. And one is our ecosystem partnership program. I don't know how much you guys might know of Watson Health, but we spun out about a year and a half ago, and we did it based on this open innovation platform where we want the Watson Health Cloud. We actually just created called Watson Health Core, and it's basically HIPAA compliant, GXP compliant, and what we do is be the ecosystem partner, especially for smaller companies, startups. You want to be able to tap into this developer cloud, right? And be able to build solutions that can tap into the compliant cloud, GXP HIPAA compliant, as well as be able to tap into potentially the APIs and technology that Watson Analytics and IBM has. So on this ecosystem partnership, we have made available this cloud. In addition, a lot of over 40 APIs that developers can access and call upon. And within that ecosystem partnership, you can also leverage technology expertise to help architect some of your solutions. And then another stage of that, besides the developer cloud, sort of the next phase is when you move into is almost like content marketplace. The whole idea is if you're bringing in data and you're developing solutions that might be aggregating data, given the certain rights and privacy, you can actually share those data for additional insights with potential other ecosystem partners to leverage that. So with this open innovation, you can then tap into sort of this content marketplace. And lastly, as a sort of ecosystem partner, you can also leverage the community with other ecosystem partners for their insights and other area of expertise. That's one program that we have running at Watson Health. And then more broadly within the IBM, we have a global entrepreneurship program, which very similar to what I just described for the ecosystem, but allows startups to be able to apply. There's some criteria that they have to meet, below a certain, I think, $1 million revenue within the last 5 years or so. But to also, basically, you can tap in if you develop on this IBM cloud, again, security compliant cloud, and call up these APIs and IT architecture. You can also get $120,000 worth of credits towards this cloud. And then also you get go-to-market advisement and consultation as part of the global entrepreneurship program. So I want to highlight those two programs that we have within IBM that can really help support some of your startup companies.
And then I want to jump to Alex. Not everyone can think like you do. You have an MBA, a PhD in chemistry, and so on so many boards. So what is it, some of those same, ballpark questions to you? What helps people get their foot in the door, start a conversation with you?
I'll start at a high level to sort of generalize. GE Ventures tries to act like other venture capital firms, and I think one of the is sort of the flippant way of describing the way investors think, and sort of driven by fear and greed. So you want to think about how your idea specifically addresses or satisfies the greed part of that equation. So you want to figure out how you're going to make a lot of money within reason, of course. We're all used to seeing these charts that go up and to the right from zero revenue through FDA clearance into $100 million revenue in 3 to 5 years. It's helpful to have that somewhat grounded in reality, and at least to have drawn some parallels with other previous products or other areas where they were able to achieve such meteoric sort of astronomical growth. And then on the fear side, you'd want to figure out what could potentially go wrong and what your mitigants are for that. So, how are you going to get reimbursement? How are you going to, of course, the topic here is big data in healthcare. How are you going to get the large amounts of data you need? Maybe train your AI. You have partnerships. Sort of what could possibly go wrong, and how are you going to address those? So that's at a high level. Next level is the GE level. So how do you actually talk to GE? It helps, I think, in any case, whether it's GE or any other investor, it helps to know your investors. So what does the investor care about? In GE's case, we've made a lot of noise recently about sort of this Predix platform. We have this cloud analytics platform. It would be helpful to any conversation you would have with GE to have done the research to see, GE's got Predix. Well, this is how we can work with Predix. We actually know what it is. And we've reached out to some other people within GE. We've had these conversations with people, some of these 3 or 4 of the 300,000 people who work at GE. So that'd be helpful. And then at the sort of that sort of, know investors in general, know the specific investor you're talking to, and how you actually reach out to the investor. I think all investors, of course, are entirely reliant on entrepreneurs. Of course, those are the people we invest in. So we try not to hide from you all. And of course, we welcome any interaction with you. So we try to make it relatively easy to find us. A lot of times on the websites of the investor, there'll be a description of the sort of things that you invested in that can sort of go towards knowing the investor. There also is frequently contact information there, so it should be very, very easy to reach out to us. If not through there, through LinkedIn. And I know some investors who purposely try to hide from entrepreneurs, hide their contact information with the extent that if an entrepreneur is really scrappy, which is the sort of investor person you want to invest in, they'll find you. GE doesn't really believe that way, so pretty much anybody within GE you can find through first name, last name @ge.com. So we make it very easy, but most investors do as well.
It's a fine line between ambition and stalking. So actually, I want to do something quickly and just go down the line. So I'll start back with you if you don't mind. But so you actually touched upon this. Obviously, make a lot of money, right? It's the most appealing thing one can do. But what turns you off?
Yeah, I mean, again, so I would say entrepreneurs who haven't done that initial work of just like, getting a sense for the sort of things that the investor invests in, or the sort of investor they're talking to, so the general firm and the individual. And then one thing that sort of is a little bit of turn off is when we see entrepreneurs who say something along the lines of there's no competition. So the no competition comment could either mean that there's no competition because it's not a very fast area you're going into, or it could mean there's no competition because you haven't done your research in terms of your own business. So that's just a high level, that would be something that should be a problem.
I think that's like tweet worthy if people are
Yeah,
doing
I
that.
was say, I would echo that in addition to knowing your customer. I know I've been sitting in on all of these panels, and that's been one of the main messages. And I would say if you don't know who your target customer is at first, that is a big turnoff for us, because it just makes us question how strategically you're thinking about your product.
I agree with all that. I think another thing for me is when entrepreneurs aren't sort of acknowledging the inherent risks associated with what they're doing in a constructive way, whereby you walk away feeling like they really have a handle on the reality of the situation and are going to do what it takes to get to the other side. Because I think, generally, you hear a lot of investors say this, so it's, people are the greatest differentiator most of the time in success or failure, and so I think you really are investing in people when you're going in at an early stage, and you want to know that you're investing in people who have a full, coherent understanding of what they're taking on and what's going to be involved in the highs and lows of getting there. So.
Great, yeah, and I mean, definitely echo what everyone else is saying. Those are all really important factors. You often hear people talk about product market fit, and that's important, but in an early stage company, we really like to look at team market fit. Like, how does the team understand the market? Have they been there operating as the customers? Do they know their customers? And it's not just to understand who's going to buy the product, but really to understand the value proposition to the customer. Like, why are they going to buy the product? Because that gets to ROI. If your product saving a hospital $1 million a year and you're charging $10,000 a year for it, then you're leaving a lot of value on the table, and it makes it difficult to think that you're going to build a big business. You want to make sure that you understand how much value you're creating so you can capture the lion's share of it. That's really important. And then to piggyback on something Alex said, it's true that we always see the hockey stick graph, and that's important because as venture, we are looking for companies that can plausibly get to something like $100 million in revenue in 5 years, but the key word is plausibly. And that means don't tell us that you're going to own 10% of $1 billion market, therefore you can do it. We need to understand the assumptions. What does your product cost? How many people do you have to sell it to? At what rate? And how do you expect it to scale so that we can believe your story that gets you to those revenue numbers?
Well, the only thing I have to add to what the other panelists have already mentioned is when we focus on partnerships at IBM Watson, because IBM is such a huge, large company, we're often dealing with partners that are relatively big and looking to make an impact in the marketplace. and our mission was really to help and save lives, really a big impact. With that said, we have a lot of priorities, and we want to choose the partnerships that we cultivate very carefully, and the projects and the solutions that we bring to market with a partner. So with that in mind, we often look at, the market landscape, the competitive landscape, the market potential, and the growth of the solution that we want to invest in to develop. And oftentimes it has to be a pretty big, growth potential and market capture. So what turns us off is, a partner comes in and hasn't done that homework, hasn't really assessed the landscape well enough, and it's too small of a revenue. We want to invest our resources to those market opportunities in life science that actually have a huge impact, like cutting the waste in the healthcare and trying to shave off and make clinical trials more efficient. So there's a lot of those things and solutions that focus on those areas with big impact are the ones that we like to take for our partnerships.
So I want to segue from that to where I wanted to go anyways, talking about data and big data. And you used words like efficient, right? And this is something I run into all the time, especially writing health tech and innovation. I get at least 50 pitches a day, and everyone's innovative. They're disruptive. They put big data in a cloud. I literally still see this 50 times a day. And lots of questions people can't answer once I start asking, well, tell me more about. And it's like, well, no, we just put big data in the cloud. So I want to go with these vague terms that you were talking about here. So how then, big data often being one of those that means different things to different people, how do you identify a good candidate for investment? What exactly, or to the best of your ability, talk to us about that vetting process, maybe the criteria or the evaluation you go through. And I'm going to ask Dylan, because as you said, you have one single backer, so that probably looks very different than some of the other people up here. So I'd like to start with you.
Well, it does and it doesn't. I mean, people often come to us because of our backer and think that we're a philanthropic organization or a family office. And, he has both of those, and they run as separate orgs. We are an early stage venture firm with the same financial mandate of any other venture firm. So we do attempt to and do our best to look at companies from that perspective. To answer this question, getting at one of the earlier questions about scientist founders, this is actually really tricky. I had a very science-driven startup prior to this, and it's really challenging for someone who spent years developing a technology to not be enamored with that technology and want to tell me everything about that technology. And I've only been in venture for about a year, but when I started, I would listen and ask questions and be excited to learn about the technology, and it turns out that's not the most important question. It feels like it should be, but it really isn't. The order of operations, the way we look at a company, is market. Does it meet those criteria about that turns on the Greek buttons from the point of view of the investor? Okay, great. Then team. Does the team fit the profile of a team that can execute in that market? Why do we think that? Who are they? And what's their background? Then the product. What are they making? How does that fit into the marketplace? Given the existing market dynamics, the competitive landscape, the stakeholders, not just who's going to pay you, but whose pocket you're taking money out of, which is extremely, important when you think about healthcare, because that's how it works. And then finally, technology. And in technology, it could be hardware, it could be something that is an invention, it could be software, algorithms that you can do better than someone else, or data. And to the question about data, there it's really tricky because, in the world of open source machine learning, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to get a big data corpus, train a model, and make predictions. So then how do you differentiate? Because, we need technology to be defensible so that fast followers with 10x the resources aren't going to eat your lunch before you get to market. And there we're going to look as best as we can for proprietary data. It's data that you generated that no one else has. It's unique in some fashion, or maybe partnerships with existing owners of data that give you access to it for this particular use case. Something that gives you a leg up, especially if those data are valuable and the world knows they're valuable, then everyone's going to be scraping them and looking for insights. So I think it's a mix of all of those factors, but at the end of the day, the defensibility is key because we need to imagine that you're going to be a big company over the next several years, and and that means you have to have a moat or some way to keep the rest of the universe from quickly doing what you do and doing it better.
Thank you. So you mentioned, I think you might be a family office or philanthropy. But Allison, you did touch on social good. So I'm going to throw the same question then to you about how do you identify a good candidate for investment, or maybe your criteria, your evaluation process. What is that?
So it's very similar to what Dylan said. I mean, we have LPs in our fund who are expecting financial returns, so we cannot just be giving money away. And to echo everything that he said, but in addition to that, a lot of the companies we work with, not only, and this is I think typical in healthcare in general, you have your customer, but you also have an end user that you're relying on for some of these data points. And so how are you ensuring that they will actually enter that data? And so you see this a lot in the care coordination platforms, diabetes management. And so the assumption that they're just going to use it is not good enough for us. We want to see something that is defensible, some kind of incentive for the end user to use it if it is a care coordination platform. But we also want to see a large enough market. We want to see some type, we're pretty early, so we're pre-Series A. Generally, about half the companies that will go through our accelerator will have bootstrapped, the other half will have raised. Those companies that we actually invest in, the skew is pretty typical, and so they'll go on to raise most likely a Series A. But we're looking for some kind of traction, and so pilot studies, partnerships, something that demonstrates that your product does what it says it will actually do.
So Alex, this might be kind of a tough question, but so going with that, this may not be the right word, but I'm going to pose is like, what level of data do you want to see? Because you brought this up first. When someone comes to you, what's too early? Maybe put some end, what's too early or what's too late?
Yeah, I mean, in the big data thing, I think to Dylan's point, it is relatively easy to get a large pool of data. So all we want to see, at least to get the conversation started, is that you have an algorithm applied to some pool of big data, and you're able to start drawing out some interesting correlations. So I mean, it is kind of a sort of tough question in the big data space, especially because you can actually start a company relatively quickly and get enough data to be a viable company. I think it's all the other aspects of the company that take a while to fall in place. So sort of coming up with a viable business model, especially in big data and healthcare, that can be a challenge. But just in terms of data, we have fairly light requirements.
Okay, well, so you just touched a little bit upon the team, and I think, Annie, it was you earlier who mentioned something about a team. So can you say exactly or ballpark what you're looking for in those teams?
Yeah, I mean, it's always tempting to just say the cliche things, right? You want really passionate, talented founders who are qualified to be starting what they're starting and, they're going to get to the other side. But you want all those things. But I think one of the things that I've spent more time thinking about in the context of some of the companies that we're currently invested in and getting to know some of the teams that are really trying to crack some of the harder problems that relate to these intersections of sort of science and software, which really in a lot of ways you are trying to translate science into software. There's one company where it hasn't closed, so I won't disclose it, but they built their own proprietary coding language so that the scientists can put their protocols and procedures into something that then the software engineers can pick up to eliminate the need for some of these groups of people to spend so much time trying to translate across the domains. But I think it's a really fundamentally challenging problem because I think the cultures, the work styles, the habits, the way that people are used to building these different domains are actually very different. And so getting everybody that you need on board and working together in the right way to solve some of these problems, is more than just a technical problem. And so we do, more recently I have been spending more time kind of trying to think through that, especially with entrepreneurs that we're meeting with, because I think it's a really important aspect to getting this stuff done from the ground floor up through scale.
And so I liked one of the things you said, just the right people on board. And Perfect, so you're
No,
already
I-
raising your
actually-
hand, and so Linda, I of course want to throw that down.
Well, I just wanted to actually go back one step to dive a little bit deeper into the question you had, what type of details and data. So, yeah, so let me just kind of share with you our experience at IBM. We have now over 300 million individualized patient records longitudinally over a 5 to 10 year time span. But still, that's not enough. We, create more data to do these algorithms and analytics and predictive modeling. When I think of data, it's almost like breadth and depth, right? We have breadth because, we span all these different therapeutic areas to do macro population health management, also almost micro personalized patient management. But in terms of depth, where the field, there's still need, and if any of you guys are focusing on this, let me know. There's still a gap in need in deep oncology specific clinical data, EHR data, genomics data. So if any of you are working on that, there's still not many. Great, we should talk.
Well, actually, I want you to keep the microphone. So what I was going to do is actually go off of her statement about people on board, and since you are kind of the person I look to talk about partnerships. Do you have an established partner ecosystem? What do you use for development? How do you look for those kinds of things?
Oh, yes.
Company?
Thanks, Nicole. So this goes back to sort of my earlier comment. We have different, programs that allow us to cultivate a relationship with a startup or ecosystem partner with their solutions or their technology. And we often, with this open platform, let them, utilize our cloud and API and develop and build things that they, have the creativity to, because we don't know all the things that will come about. That was the whole thing about this open platform. And the idea was that, should they have these startup companies develop solutions or apps or whatever, maybe tools, that over time is synergistic with our strategic imperatives within the business at IBM Watson Health, because we do have sort of 5 strategic pillars. It ties in very well. We can then kind of cherry pick those projects, those companies, those ideas to bring it in-house and ultimately bring it to market. So that's one way we sort of cultivate and develop ecosystem partners and startup companies.
Thank you. So then, what sort of level of involvement? And I know these can depend on, like maybe said, which part of life science you're doing. So thinking about when people are coming to you, they want sort of to know how much they have to give up. How much involvement do you have once you decide to invest? And then also, what's that time frame look like? And I'm content going just down the line again, because you're each going to have a different answer.
Yeah, in our case, we try to operate at the traditional speed of venture capital, which in healthcare is not fast, but it's also not glacial. So we can get an investment done, I would say, 5 weeks if we're really enthusiastic and motivated. And of course, it stretches out to much longer if need be. In terms of what level of involvement we have, GE is very proactive about trying to sort of be the stereotypical more than money. So while we may not always get a board seat, we do at least have a board observer seat almost every case. And what we try to do is we're trying to leverage sort of the scale and operational logistics of GE to help the company grow. So we do things like we've brought companies to China to introduce them to government at the highest levels, to healthcare systems. We also have started putting GE fellows, sort of free of charge. We take people from our various training programs within GE and place them at the company for up to a year. Just let them work there free of charge. It helps the company out, especially with small companies, benefit from an extra headcount. In GE's case, it helps bring a little bit of entrepreneurial sort of spirit into the workforce within GE, because that person hopefully comes back to GE and doesn't stay at the startup. And then one of the last things I'll mention is GE is fairly well known for having a sort of an executive training program. We have sort of a college campus, the GE College campus in upstate New York. And we've opened that up to C-level executives at our startups, and so we'll actually pay to fly the executives out to Crotonville, as the place is called, and give them training in leadership, strategy, management, that sort of thing. So we try to, that's the sort of involvement we have. We also, of course, are open to and encourage conversations with any of the business units that may be relevant within GE to the startup, so we try to foster those communications as well.
So we write pretty small checks, and so what that means is that typically we will not be able to close ground for an entrepreneur, and so we are very proactive in helping the entrepreneurs that we do invest in get that next round of funding because it helps us, quite frankly. But in addition to that, we also want to see them grow their customer base. And so I think those are the two primary ways that we assist our portfolio companies, and that's basically just through leveraging our network so that they are able to close that round, or if they're needing an introduction at an ACO, or whatever the case may be. So we typically tend to be very hands-on. When they call us, we will do whatever it takes to get them what they need.
So our level of involvement tends to directly correlate to whether there's a board seat or there's not a board seat. So if there's a board seat, then I'm pretty involved, and if there's not, then I try to be helpful wherever I can, but it tends to skew a lot. And from an involvement perspective, I mean, I think the approach that we take is from a more traditional venture on the generalist tech side, which is we're not operators, I'm not an operator, then basically my entire professional life on the venture side. So we help with strategy, we try to be as constructive and supportive as we can to the entrepreneurs in dealing with various situations that they face, but we don't, ever really get involved in the underlying operations of the company.
Yeah, so, we definitely correlate our involvement to the level of investment, and we syndicate often. If we're taking a leadership role and a board seat, then we're gonna do everything we can to help the company, operationally. We actually have a team internally called the Value Creation Team that is there specifically to do business development work on behalf of the portfolio companies. So that ranges from reaching out, using Eric's network to get introductions to the C-suite at potential customer sites, to hosting internal demo days for a big corporate where we bring in the relevant portfolio companies to pitch internally to the corp dev team from that particular strategic. And we'll do that for all of our portfolio companies, but there's definitely a difference between those that we're leading and those where we're participating. Similarly with timing, if we're going to lead a round, we're going to take our time to diligence that and try to get things done on a reasonable time scale, often, within 6 weeks to a couple months. If we're following an investor that we trust, that we've worked with before, who's leading the round, we can get to a decision to participate rather quickly. And I've seen it happen as quick as a week, and that really depends again on the parameters of the round and who's involved.
So for the strategic partnerships, which are obviously more intensive and we get support from executive leadership on those clearly, before we even embark on those and ink the agreements, we have to agree on a long-term vision usually, and then we have gated stages of deliverables and projects during that life of the partnership. And oftentimes, once it's inked, we usually have projects, pilots, deliverables within 6 to 12 months time frame, and go-to-market solutions within that time frame, and follow-on projects. On the ecosystem partnership side, it's very different, whereas Watson Health is more of a supportive role. The ecosystem company partner can operate very independently and seek out, IBM for additional whether it's business marketing or technology support. So different flavors.
So I really like, Alex, that you mentioned like China, for example, and then each of you talked a little bit about something unique that you do. And so I want, as we wrap up here, to think about, the reason I primarily love that you mentioned China is the last couple of weeks I was working with a cervical cancer diagnostic, and we couldn't get a lot done here, so we went to the Congo, went to Malawi. And in both countries, 1/4 of women die of cervical cancer. So we kind of flipped things on its head and said, let's go. I can't wait to see what that data looks like. So anyway, thinking about the future and having talked a little bit about what things have progressed like over the last 5 years, I'd like my last question before we open it up to be the next 5 years. We don't
Well, I mean, so what we expect to see, so GE, I'll just take a very specific example. So GE makes a lot of the world's MRIs, CT scanners, PET scanners, and all those other things. One thing we're very interested in doing is improving or increasing the use of those. And so one thing we're investing in, one place we hope the market goes to, is a lot of big data that's applied to image analytics, specifically for ultrasound, MRI, PET scanners, CAT scanners, to both assist radiologists and in some select cases potentially decrease the objectivity or the subjectivity associated with having radiologists in the workflow. So that's one place where we see, we've already made a couple of bets and we will continue to make bets in that space, and that's one place we see the market going in the next 5 years.
So for us, we are really interested in areas where you can leverage data technology outside of the clinic. And there's, our WJF came out with a study a while back, 40% of an individual's health outcome is actually determined by social determinants. So all of those variables that are related to income and where you live. And so we're really excited about innovation in that space and the way that you can leverage those tools to improve clinical outcomes.
Yeah,
I mean, I think echoing off that, one, it's always hard to know what you want to see happen, because I think one of the beauties of investing in early stage companies is that you're waiting for the day that an entrepreneur is going to walk through your door and pitch you on something that's really unique and disruptive about how the world may end up. And I think those are usually the most exciting meetings and companies to be involved in. Oftentimes it means you're too early, but I think different firms have different views on that. For us, that's okay. But on a more tangible basis with some of this stuff, I think, for me anyway, it's still really unclear whether or not we have enough data in the right structures and the right formats that you're going to be able to actually tangibly deliver on some of the promise that is being proposed by all of this stuff. And given regulatory constraints and everything else, there could be significant timeframes associated with actually delivering on a lot of the things that people are working on. So I think, in that light, clarity on some of the macro issues around how the FDA is going to view some of these things and where all of this is going to go would certainly make investing in some of it more comfortable.
All right, forgive me if I go a little outside the box here, but the thing about healthcare is, we have this notion that it's shifting. In the ACA, we're moving from fee-based to value-based, but I think maybe 5% of the U.S. healthcare system is value-based today, and it's been 6 years. And at this rate, it's going to be 20 or 30 years before we figure out how to reward preventative care and chronic disease population management. And there are all these sensors coming online, whether it's recognizing voices and sentiments for mental health or activity with video cameras. And the move towards passive collection of data about patient populations feels extremely important, and what we need now are the financial incentives to align so that it actually is important from the point of view of the payers. There's something like $17 billion of venture that has gone into digital health in the last 5 years, and if you look at the returns, it's not equivalent. And what I really hope to see is that we get some wins so that investors continue to focus in this area and it doesn't follow a hype cycle like biofuels, for example. And there was a really great essay actually last month by Malay Gandhi. If you don't know him, you should look him up. He ran Rock Health for a while, and it's about building a health technology company, and he makes a really strong point. We don't want to make healthcare better. We need to make healthcare different, because making it incrementally better is not going to create big wins, and it's not going to move the needle when we're talking about $3 trillion a year and growing.
very well said, and I concur completely. So along those lines, I would bucketize maybe 3 key areas that over our interests that we're focusing on IBM. One is around, as Alex mentioned, clinical decision support. That's a big area that we put a lot of effort in using Watson AI technology, not only in imaging analytics and predictive and clinical decision support, but also in life sciences and for the providers too. That incorporates imaging data, EHR data, medical literature publications to really help be a physician or provider assistant or radiologist assistant, the whole gamut, and pulling in diagnostic data too in terms of genomic and also laboratory, all that. So that's one area that we have made a lot of investments in. Another area, bucket area I would categorize as personalized medicine. That I think encompasses obviously getting down to the genomic typing and also the mobile health and the sensors, because a lot of us are wearing these Apple Watches and Fitbits and all that stuff, and how are we going to make that relevant in terms of our health and acting on it for a provider. So I was around really patient-centric care. It goes towards value-based outcome, but also really we're moving towards a patient-consumer sort of focus. Patients are being empowered now. It's sort of risk sharing. They're taking charge of their health care. They're shopping around for providers and caretakers. So going forward, sort of the next way, we want to focus solutions that we build towards the patient as well.
So I'd like to open it up for just a couple of quick questions. I saw you first.
Two questions for the panel. One, the trends in the United States for patent protection for both diagnostic methods and algorithms have been facing considerable challenges from the Supreme Court and the patent appeals courts here in the United States. To what extent has that dampened your enthusiasm for investing in the field, either internally, and are you seeing any, in terms of your portfolio companies, is there any progress being made of late in that regard? And the second, in terms of reimbursement, is there any indication that CMS is going to begin to code for algorithms per se, apart from a diagnostic? Have you seen any progress in that regard?
Very good questions.
Well, so from my perspective,
Perspective, the algorithms are not the most important part. They're not the hardest part. The data is the hardest part. So, and the algorithms change and get better and better and better the more data that you have and the higher the quality of the data that's flowing through the system. So I don't really worry about the patent protection on the algorithms, because I think that the play is really, can you get to scale on the data side and stay ahead of everybody else with respect to what you can do. So
I have to agree with that. At least conversations I'm in on the Hill, we're not talking about the algorithms themselves.
Well, I mean, diagnostics have been very difficult to find for a long time. I'm not sure Prometheus makes it that much worse than it was before. It kind of depends on who you are as an investor, but from a software perspective, we've never relied on IP really.
And I saw another hand up here. Do you still have a question?
Oh yeah, I do. I'm not sure exactly how it's related, but Dylan, you mentioned about, how do you keep from just becoming another one of those hype blips. So when we think about 5 years down the road, when these early stage solutions are coming to market, and there's going to be a lot more noise of disruption. I'd just like to hear your comments on what do you think is going to actually stick, what's going to be heard, and how do you make sure that you get through that, because I can't imagine what it's going to be like to be in those hospitals facing, or in the healthcare system facing all of that massive disruption on every edge.
And I like the word you used, noise.
It's really noisy. I went to my primary care physician. I was like, hey, let's order some genetic tests. And we get this 24-page requisition form, and he's like, I'm not a cardiogeneticist. Neither am I. Okay, pick a panel. And I mean, there definitely needs to be help informing your customers, whoever they are, about how to make intelligent decisions so they can separate the signal from the noise. But there are hospitals, CIOs are, they're already inundated with solutions. Everyone's got a better EMR or a way to get unstructured data out of your EMRs and correlate that. How do you pick the solution? I mean, you need to look at results. You need to look at outcomes, like which ones are performing well, and that's where you get to metrics, adoption, revenue, all of the numbers we associate with measuring the performance of a successful company in another sector. We have to apply here too. It's just harder because so many of them are coming out with a huge marketing push before they're commercial, and then it's you you know, you have to just do the heavy lifting of understanding what they're doing and whether it's gonna add value. It's hard.
And is there one more? Perfect timing, we just hit our time anyway, so I'd like to thank the panel. It was a wonderful session.